Hey, my name is Brian, and I'd like to give a talk to you today about an interpretation of Heidegger's Being and Time and an allegory that I've created to hopefully help you make sense of being in time, which is, of course, an incredibly difficult work to get through. And I think the allegory, as allegories have in the past for a lot of philosophers, can really help distill concepts and make sense of the work itself. Uh, Being in Time obviously was Heidegger's magnum opus, written in the early 1900s, and really paved the way for a lot of existentialism. Because Heidegger is writing about the concepts phenomenologically that deal with being from a very non-Cartesian point of view, and really put Dasein, or human beings, in and alongside and among all that it is existing in the world, and does not deal with concepts of God or virtue directly, but more focuses on these phenomenological aspects of existence that did pave the way for other thinkers, whom I believe Heidegger would greatly discount, like Sartre, and there have been, not discount, but critique. So I think that Heidegger's work, and I must say this up front, is profound and deserves a lot more credibility, even though I think some of his ideas were not fully expressed. I think this allegory can help us start to make sense of some of the concepts and why Heidegger was pushing, these Husserlic concepts to a further degree, and really breaking apart a lot of the canon of philosophical thought in this seminal work. So a few concepts we'll talk about, but first let me give you the allegory. The allegory is, much like the cave, is very simple. It's to imagine a monolithic giant machine in a windowless warehouse, and you, as an onlooker, gaze upon this machine, and it is sprawling, gigantic. The warehouse is almost, you can't really see even the top of the building. It fades into darkness. It's just, and this machine is there, and it is monumental. Much like staring at the pale blue dot of the earth in total darkness, this machine is running in this warehouse with nothing else, no light shining in except for, you can just see the machine. So let's break down some Heideggarian concepts and then talk about how these apply to the machine and help us make sense of being in time. So one is phenomenology. That is the study of what we can sense and perceive as human beings. It's the study of phenomena, or our experience in the world. And Heidegger takes on the concept of breaking down being, which he says has been addressed before, but needs further critique in order to, from previous thinkers, in order to make sense of what being is and what being means. So for Heidegger, we are all Dasein, which in German translates to being there. We're thrown beings that wound up in the world. In this world, in this time, in this facticity. There's numerous concepts that Heidegger introduces here and creates, but Dasein is things which are conscious in and alongside everything that is also being and is there within the world. And world is not the world like the earth or a planet. I know we use that term. World is a vast concept of interconnected entities that are either Dasein, or they're some sort of tool for our usage, or they're a yet to be exposed tool that has some potential that is existing within our frame of reference. These are phenomenological aspects of existence. So world is the entire interconnection of all those things that cooperate and literally cooperate, but are working alongside one another, and have some sort of interplay. And within Dasein structure of world existing in and alongside all these potentials and actual tools, Heidegger is going to make another assertion that there is two modes of being and being a Dasein. One is being authentic and being inauthentic. And a way to think about this is authenticity is a sort of awareness of self and in actualizing of a mode of you being that is not given by the state of everything in world. An inauthentic being is more of a doing what world is doing and sort of living into the system of the world. And Heidegger calls this inauthentic mode of being the they structure. And the they structure for Heidegger and the inauthentic mode of being, which is just, riding the bus or watching TV and passing along some gossip, or, the queen has died and what do we think of it? The they is a very powerful force. It's sort of the averaging force of world. It's the decision of consciousness about how authentic things that have happened should be judged and valued and validated and then reincorporated into world and conscious living and changed, right? So person A, Dasein A, has a new machine that they've come up with that solves, some new form of transportation, and then the they goes, we don't need another bicycle, or we don't want, or we love this new concept and we're going to change a lot of things in order to incorporate that. That could be an example of inauthentic versus authentic being and the value and of the they. So how this works in the allegory is essentially world is the machine itself. The machine is the inauthentic, interconnected interplay of all Dasein existing and the authentic being itself of Dasein within world. And Dasein are the components of the machine. Dasein are the mechanisms. They're the components. They're like a screw or a cog or a piece of piping or something like that. The tools and the ready at hand, the present at hand, things, potential for use or already made for using, are the fluids or things that could be used to make the machine run, right? So a tree could become paper, and paper can become money, and money can be used to influence, and that's sort of a componentry of the machine that we have now used the tree as to potentiate it into something. But what that looks like in the machine world is that there was this inert thing that could be used, and then the machinery componentizes it and then processes it. But Dasein are, a way to think about it is Dasein are pieces of metal that emerge into the machine hot and ready to be molded and have a certain sort of potential within their metal and within their heat signature for the time that they're going to have in their phenomenological existence, and their likelihood to be used for some sort of component or another component, right? And that probably depends on there's a lot of things that Heidegger's getting at in terms of the limitations that are imposed on Dasein too by being thrown into a system. One is that system has a history, it's been running, it's been changing, and you just emerge into it. That's the facticity of the machine itself. It's like, this is my era, my epoch, this is what I can potentially change or do with my time and my chemistry, my determinateness. And it probably depends on where you are in the machine. And there's a lot of, like interplay. And this is basically, our struggle, like existing in the world, right? But if you can imagine a component being produced in the machine is really hot, and then it just has to, go find a place. That's sort of Dasein's job in the machine. Inauthenticity in the machine is just doing the job the machine is set up. So this is the carrying the fluid, it's the turning of the cog, it's the pumping of a piston, whatever this machine is. You think of it as a monumental engine. It's some sort of just continual processing and working and operating as almost like prescribed. Authenticity is coexists with the concept that Heidegger terms anxiety, which is anxiety is kind of like one way to describe inauthenticity and authenticity is like you're in traffic. You are traffic. You're a part of traffic, and you're just driving to work, and you're not thinking. You're just driving. Authenticity is first there's anxiety that comes up that says, I'm aware that I'm in traffic. I wonder if there's a different way to do this. I don't want to be doing this. I think that there's a different way. And it's a challenge to the inauthentic mode. And it may, an authentic choice would then be diverting your pathway, trying to find a better way to do something. It's the expression of self that somehow has this uncanny ability to say, I have a difference of opinion from the inauthentic mode. So that's what Heidegger is distinguishing here. And of course, the they is, as I mentioned, all the components within the machine just doing their jobs. So the they is a very important concept here besides just the individual. And I think Heidegger puts a lot more importance on it and critiques people like Sartre and Being and Nothingness, who put so much value on the individual and this individual struggle versus the acknowledgement that the they has a sort of value. And I would say that when someone looks at the machine, when you walk into this warehouse and you see this monumental machine, what you are judging in the machine is the they state. I'll talk about time next. And time in the machine, Heidegger has a very different definition of time. Time for Heidegger is, again, phenomenological. It is the experience of an awareness of a lifespan, that there is this sort of, as I mentioned, thrownness, but thrownness for Dasein is also sort of like a sudden coming aware in terms of being in the world that others are dying and are no longer going to be present in the machine, and that will happen to everyone, and that they will have, not likely, but it will happen, and so Dasein have this sort of he calls it a sense of care, where they are aware of the past and things that have happened before, and then there's the things that are not yet happened, but we can kind of predict, and then there's the things that you can do within the current structure that is the existence that you are in. And that's kind of also his mode for the ecstasies of time, which is, Dasein sort of temporalizes time by their ability to exist in this ambiguity, predicting what might happen next, and then actually enacting change that does influence the state of things, so that then there can be different ambiguity that others interact with in order to change the events that are happening there. And I think that time is the aspect where this allegory really starts to shine, because if you imagine being in a warehouse where you're standing in front of a machine that you can't see the sides or the top, it's just monumental. And it's so big, you can imagine that it may not look like it's moving. Kind of like looking at the earth on a, if it's on a video and it's just a black screen, the earth doesn't look like a lot of stuff's going on. There's a lot going on under the surface. And I think that the time temporalizing itself is Dasein making authentic choices, and the they structure averaging those, and actually you might see some sort of change where somebody does something different, a cog doesn't want to keep doing the same job, it moves to do something else, something either falls apart or gets revolutionized, changes in the machine, and that's where all of a sudden the machine adapting and then constantly sort of re-expressing itself, and becoming something different. The becoming different is the only entropy that is the onlooker sees. So Heidegger has almost extrapolated consciousness out into an external observer, and then the external observer is that consciousness looking back on the machine. And as the like cogs or components make state changes, that's where you see the change, and that's where the observer goes, something different happened. And the only way to actually progress, view progress or change, progress maybe in a Hegelian sense, but change in the machine, is that temporalized sort of change that happens from an authentic gesture of one of the components, or some of the components of the machine. So some concepts here just to unpack in terms of the allegory. Facticity is sort of the state of the machine during one's being, and that's something that is being in a nullity. It's that not choosing the state of the machine, but then having an authentic point of view that may be opposed to the machine itself. And care is mostly about machine prediction. It's understanding of what was happening in the past, and then a component sort of extrapolating itself, looking at the machine, and then saying, well, not yet, but maybe something like this will happen, or having some sort of awareness. And that awareness is the anxiety. The awareness is like it's the pulling back to. Care is prediction, knowing the past, being in the present. But anxiety is the pulling away. And being towards death, which is that concept of I get thrown in here and I'm aware that I'm going to die, is a very interesting extrapolation to the allegory. Is the allegory would say it's a willfulness to change the machine with regards to one's own authenticity. And the temporalization that Heidegger refers to in terms of the interconnection between Dasein being the ecstasies of time is the machine changing and the implications of time that emerge by Dasein making authentic choices that are then capitulated within the machine. So I think that this is a profound work. Like Heidegger's work is incredibly it's made a huge impact on my life and many others' lives, and I think it's often I think it plays very well with into an understanding of multiple different domains outside of just the concepts of philosophy, or that, kind of mental sort of foreplay. It has serious implications on art and business and psychology. I think that it pairs very well with Hegelian notions of dialectics, in which we start to consider in this allegory of the machine value structures and absurdity, which I think that were offshoots of this that then other philosophers tried to run with and largely butchered. I think Sartre was largely a child and very self-focused and didn't understand the value of the they. with the concept of the look and being objectified, I think that he missed the point of seeing mutual benefit in others and the cooperation that may pair two people together. And I in the Hegelian notion of dialectics, I think one thing we have to ask ourselves is, is the machine progressing towards something? And the difficulty of Heidegger in the expression of the machine is, what is the value of a machine that doesn't, if it, let's say it's a monumental engine that doesn't drive anywhere, that doesn't move, that doesn't have any purpose or place to go, that recreates itself over and over and again just to be a machine that keeps using its resources to pump fluids to just keep doing that job. And then you emerge with these dimensional concepts of using the tree to create the paper, to create a value system that then some components may utilize to their benefit over others. And we start to look at the machine in that regard, it's almost like there are systems or components that may be exploiting the they structure and the other componentry in order for their gain of resources. And you can start to maybe piece together what it might look like in this allegory to have, a more like a neoliberal machine is one in which the components are all individualized and non oppressed by government, and so they all think very narcissistically about how they can create more of their own value storage and become their own best machine outside of the machine or to the machine itself for their own gain. Or maybe from a utilitarian point of view, how there might be oversight and regulation of the machine controlling itself in order to make the they structures function as best as they can. You think about concepts of Robin Hood and utilitarianism of rogue agents in the machine stealing from certain components and giving back to the they structure within them. But all of this is housed within this concept of extrapolation away from the machine in order to look at it and choose and have value judgments about it. And I think the really uncanny notion of Heidegger is that there is no person walking into the machine. The person is your consciousness of your specific cog extrapolated to look at the machine from a third person point of view, make value judgments on it, and then choose what your component should mold or change into in order to impact the machine. So we're like a constant work on ourselves that works on the machine itself. And I think that another way to give Heidegger more credence is to talk about the they structure and how what you're really doing by being authentic is trying mostly I would say, I'll take that back. I'll walk that back. I think that authenticity can be against the they and it can be for the they, but I think that is really where philosophical merit and debate and Hegelian notions of progress really come into play. Is let's take the example of Camus. Camus talks about the stranger making ambiguous choices to murder somebody and go to trial and doesn't care. And in a large way, if you think about the allegory of the machine, they chopped a component of the machine off and just said, I didn't really care about that. What I do care about is, the expression of hate that I might get from my lynchers when I am faced with my execution. That's a very authentic gesture. It goes against the, murdering somebody goes against the they structure. Obviously, we police against that. Policing is a they structure that we're all within and have largely agreed upon as protecting us. And yet it butchers an aspect of the machine. And I think one of the reasons that Heidegger values inauthenticity, and even as much, if not more, than authenticity, is because he's trying to put a larger store of value into the machine itself. And the machine running is really what's important. And if you look at the action in terms of the machine running, it really goes against there being there's multiple ways to look at it, but you could say in an analysis of The Stranger that the from the antagonistic point of view, the character, I don't remember if they have a name in the story, but the stranger themselves, I believe, is trying to say, in a way, I'm doing this absurdly, but I dislike being followed and antagonized, and that might not have a value for his view of the machine, this view of antagonism. But at the same time, it doesn't respect other people's rights. It's obviously like a very selfish thing to do and an extreme thing to do. And we must ask ourselves, are components doing this? And this is where, right, Heidegger and the Allegory of the Machine gets into concepts of philosophy of law, right? What is right for the machine? And that's where we draw, I think laws are largely drawn from, is asking questions for the overall machine in order to create a more harmonious and well-functioning interplay between components. But I do think that it's very interesting that, the questions that arise are, if the machine is placed in a non-driving, non-directed, non-progressing warehouse, it just exists to pump and circulate. And let's even shrink this analogy down to it just being a car engine. It's a car engine without a car that's just throbbing on an engine block in a warehouse, in an engine room. That doesn't seem to have much point. So if a component gets lopped off and then the engine changes and tries to adapt, or then says we're going to kill off his componentry too because we can't have bad actors in our engine, we need our engine to work more efficiently. Obviously, that does make sense, but where is the ultimate progress there, right? And the questions that I think that people should ask themselves after reading Heidegger is, what is the more efficient day structure? When do components get operationalized to live in ways that are more effective and utilize? I think the overarching goal, Heidegger would say from a philosophical point of view, is that each component should be able to meet its fullest potential within the day structure, right? So it's not that, from a French Revolution standpoint, that some people are having way more than others, and then there's this uprising, the machine reconfigures itself, right? You want stability, you want harmonious potentiality to be fully expressed. And that's where this gets very Hegelian and dialectical for me, but that what we're trying to do is operationalize the day structure to be at its fullest potential, and that would be the fullest expression of the machine for all the componentry that exists, without any components that don't feel like they are maximizing their thrown being from birth to death, right? And then you have questions of, well, is our current system, where we're thrown into school systems, we eventually choose jobs, and then we work those jobs until we're old enough and our componentry is failing, and then we, sit home, travel around, and make use of our hobbies until we eventually pass away. Is that the most effective usage value that we can put into the machinery that exists within the time that exists for that Dasein, and that's obviously a Platonic sort of viewpoint in terms of the republic and how the republic might function. But there could be many other viewpoints, as we mentioned, some like utilitarian neoliberalism, that all fit within this concept of the they and the and world and the interconnectedness of the machine just processing. So the other thing that I was going to mention is, I've listened to a lot of Philosophize This, which I think is an extraordinary podcast, and very helpful for understanding the high level of some of these philosophers' overall viewpoints. And I really like the series on Byung-Chul Han and our panopticon, Foucault's panopticon. And I think that questions should arise within this allegory of the machine around the detriment of the and progress that may exist within the they structure when considering our technology. And I think that one of the things that becomes clear with Allegory of the Machine is that the machine itself, since it functions so much with the they, but the they can now be connected to all these other components that are not within their local engine running, and thus get influenced by and almost policed by these ideas that they don't want to be other than, creates a very strong pressurized system for the machine to operate in a specific way that is getting the most likes, the most views, is the most it's influenced essentially by feeds and by other components that have either resources or these things that the other components want or value, and whether that is beneficial for the ultimate they structure to be constantly in search of other componentry and then idealizing and operationalizing to effectively live in somebody else's message. And I think Byung-Chul Han has really good. It deals a lot with depression and anxiety in our time, and that people need to slow down and go outside and garden more. And I think that with that, with regards to the machine, I'll let my dog back in here. Byung-Chul Han is really asking questions of giving value back to the areas in the machine in which you are housed, and to spend time in ways that give more credence to what exists that you can directly impact, that shows a more like it's a value for the store of the ready at hand, and a almost Buddhist sort of agreement with the machine being more of the ready and present at hand potential than they structure, which is to say, the less that you let the machine dictate and operate on you, and the more that you give back to the interplay between the ready and present at hand, then the more you become integrated with world in a way that is fundamental, and I think a bit more human. That is to say, primitive in a way. And so I'm still exploring Byung-Chul Han and how that relates. So that's sort of I'm sort of tangent, but I do think that Heidegger and Hegel, the notion of progress, and I should just elaborate on that. Hegel's ultimate idea is that God, for Hegel, um, he was exploring these ideas of meaning and truth and freedom, and I think Hegel was ultimately getting at a dialectical progress. And dialectics for Hegel was notions of constantly gathering from our consciousness of what objects are, and a reprocessing of them. And they typically will say like it's thesis, antithesis, synthesis, but really it's more complex than that. It's the interplay between the force, the medium that expresses itself, and then the reflection of that back into the medium. And there is a sublation, which is sort of like if you can imagine a giving of some aspect of self, some identity that is then related or taken back from the other. And I myself am getting from an object some reflection of me that was given by its expression. So it's kind of like this. I imagine that there are forces, and they kind of go like this. They go, you're a flower pot, and I see that you're white, and white is a color that I think of in some way, but you house things with inside you, and that flower pot's giving me expressions of it, and I'm sort of mastering over it and then taking back from it and getting reflected back into myself notions of the thing. And there's a dialectical movement there in which the flower pot kind of changes and morphs and becomes different things. The furthest the notion of this is how the interplay between conscious entities works, even systems, and the becoming of different systems, to say like, we no longer use pronouns because we agree, or some of us agree, that there are pronouns that don't fit certain people, and we shouldn't just lump people into two categories, and it's largely spectrum. And that antithesis to the thesis of there being male and female is progress to Hegel. It's a dialectical process, or it brings up a new conceptualization from which to platform and then expand into a different understanding of. So consciousness in a large way is the medium through which the dialectical process emerges that allows these almost the concepts and language and practice across different disciplines to grow and become stronger. And a way to think about this in the machine, of course, is the machine progressing towards a state which we cannot predict, but that is epitomized or made more transparent by there being this sort of dialectical ongoing process. Of course, you may have to ask, what is that end state? To Hegel, the end state is the absolute idea in which all contradictions are, contradictions being thesis and antithesis, are reconciled, and there is a sort of master, I guess, not subject, but a master substance or a subject that thinks things into substance. And it's almost like saying we're living in God's mind, and God is, as they think, emerging and creating something, and then the creation of something is itself God, and it's just this interplay of constant creation and manipulation of and that but to Hegel, consciousness and the progress of consciousness is approaching godliness, which is to say that we are not God-like, but that we are developing a more efficient and expressed system in the engine. And I think that really Hegel did a poor definition of it. It's so confusing, but I obviously am stumbling with it. But I do think that from a Hegelian and Heideggarian notion of Hegel is saying that the they structure is optimized within the machine. So anyhow, that's just some. Hopefully, the this allegory of the machine and the notions of time and what it means to be within the machine are somewhat. This has helped you, given you a different sense of what Hegel might be trying to express. I hope that in reading these, thinking about these terms with this sort of allegory can help it help ground some of these notions. And I would say, some of my favorite moments of my life have been reading Heidegger and Hegel and seeing the world. When I read, small diatribe before I end here, when I read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, and then when I became more of an existentialist in my youth when I was deconstructing, and I read Sartre and La Nausea and then Camus and The Stranger, and I was trying to get a bearing on existentialism outside of my religious family. I was very challenged that existence could be all that there was, and there wasn't some, these concepts of guilt and sin were imposed ideas, and that this could just be it, and that you would just live and that you would die, and that what do you do with this time? And I really didn't like those concepts, and they really felt ugly to me, and I wanted there to be more. And it took a long time, and I think that Sartre at least is good from this sense of saying, well, if this is all that there is, then the meaning that you give yourself is the story that you sort of create and tell yourself about what things mean in an observed universe. But I think that in reading more philosophy, especially Heidegger, given a notion of existentialism and having that be sort of like this ugly bedrock from which I emerged from a religious upbringing, it made it a very valuable, and it gave me a very strong sense of morals, more morals than I'd ever get from a religion that told me that I shouldn't do something because it's a sin or it's bad. Morals, because I look at the state of the machine and I think about progress, and what authenticity means to me is how I help that machine progress and get to a better point where the they structure is optimized. That is a profound sense of responsibility and opportunity, and gives me so much more agency to be in the world more fully, especially knowing that I only have a finite amount of time before my componentry will no longer cease to be and will become, how can I change that system to be better for others? And I think that's where religion starts to make a lot more, and humanity starts to take on a lot more value outside of notions of godliness, which is to say that God is. It's easy to see where somebody could say, especially given the past, Lord operates in mysterious ways, and look at this blessing that was bestowed upon these people by not understanding like the elements of nature, or seeing some component do something that greatly impacts all these people and saying like, praise the Lord. But really having a more, it's easier to see that the uncanniness of Dasein, to look outside of themselves and then understand something about the machine and then make state changes that will then impact the machine in ways that that are outside of other components' controls, is in a way a very godly sort of aspect that could easily be reinterpreted as Hegel's God, which is to say notions of progress. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord might mean to another person with another conceptualization, not to say that I am forcing religion on this, but I feel like I am. Really, what I'm trying to say is uh, one person's belief that their god or gods did something positive might be equivalent to a Hegelian notion of progress in the machine. And maybe we're all trying to speak the same language there in some way and having different interpretations of how we say it. And it's much simpler than um, these erudite or um, old uh, solidified ideologies that are divisive and pit people against each other. Regardless, I aspects of business fall into this, art fall out of this. It's such a wide ranging topic. We could spend hours and hours talking about the machine and how and Heidegger and Hegel essentially giving us these great gifts of philosophical discourse to help us be better, not to help us, but to give us the tools to see our reality more clearly, to help us see ourselves as the shackled people, not the shadows on the wall, and to enliven discussion and our spirits. So I hope this has been helpful. Feel free to drop me a comment if you liked interpretation, if you dislike it. I plan to do more talks like this as if things come up, but really this is the one I've been working on for the last year. So yeah, thank you very much, and hope you're well.